Game 60, Newcastle versus Bournemouth on the 17th of February 2024. Titled, Not Everything Changes for the Better. London-on-Sea, that's where I head for today's game. Yeah, alright, I know it isn't by the seaside. As I make my way to the capital, I sit and once again reflect on the HS2 work continuing along the run into Marylebone. Progress? Is it making any? I wouldn't really be able to tell, but I then reflect on the progress in general. Is everything that progresses actually for the better? Were plastic bags better than brown paper bags? Well, we were all told yes, so we used plastic bags, and the world realised they were harmful to the environment and didn't actually biodegrade. I still think it's better to have plastic carrier bags when carrying home my Chinese meal though. I've lost many Chinese meals where the oil has disintegrated the paper bag on my traditional after Saturday night drinks walk home. But apart from that one defined criteria for using a plastic bag, we are back with brown paper bags. Okay? Endowment mortgages. They were sold as the best thing since sliced bread for only a couple of generations to find out they were not. Diesel cars. Diesel, when we first were encouraged to buy them, was sluggish but cheaper on fuel. So everyone got one. Now it's both fucking dearer per litre than petrol and an absolute no-no for future generations. What advice will we get next? Buy electric? Well, let's see how that pans out. So my point is, not every progress type of change is necessarily right. A friend of mine told me when I actually questioned him about the world. I said it's warmed up as it's evolved from the Ice Age to where we are now. So I simply said, if that didn't make global warming a natural phenomenon, what does? He actually agreed the world will warm up of its own natural progression, but we are the catalyst in speeding up that process. Now I understand. But given the benefit of hindsight, we are trying to progress and redress the balance, which is both hard and difficult. By making the world use its own natural power, wind turbines, wave technology, harnessing the power of tidal movement, solar energy, etc. I think personally we should build new power plants to harness a different electricity source. Now if you are old enough, you will remember this. I think we should build a 500 room hotel with double beds in each room. Offer these bedrooms out for free. Now before you think I'm going down a mucky route, I'm not. But in these rooms, make up every bed with nylon sheets. And then in the morning harness all that static electricity. You're right, it won't work. I didn't think it through well enough, but I did crack a little smile for a moment. I wander through the ticket machines that once upon a time used to be manned, or personnel as we should say now. Ticket machines use electricity versus a person with a job and a wage. Business was say more efficient and cheaper, but that is a job that has now become defunct for somebody. I purchased some water from a supermarket on my way to work. Scan it at the self-service till, which is electric and cheaper for the supermarkets. But it's another job for a human that is gone. You don't need power for a human, but you do need food, and then you need to pay for that food, so you need a job. Isn't this a vicious circle type of scenario? Into Baker Street and my ticket doesn't work, and I look for assistance. When I find someone, they deal with it. This talking to a human really works. So, is all progress right? Or do we have to have hindsight for checking that purpose? Try it, see if it's good, review, and then progress. Simple. But simply do it just because it's a cost-cutting measure, that isn't right. Why the mental conundrum over this? Well, as I walk past the pipework outside Baker Street Station for the umpteenth time, I remember back to an advert some years back. A little advertising here, but it was for Heineken, and I may paraphrase the dialogue a bit, but the scene was a busy city centre street being dug up for some work to be done. When as they were excavating the street, another firm came along and said, "Oh, while you're digging that up, can we use your hole to lay our water pipe?" Before shortly another service came along and said, "Can we utilise your excavation to put our gas pipe in?" Before another contractor and then another contractor came along and asked the same. The bloke in the hole said, "What a good idea." It was always his response. "Why not put all the services in when we dig up the road once and save the public all the hassle?" Up then came the tagline of "How refreshing, how Heineken," before a hearse come along. Sometimes we could be smarter, sometimes we are not. What cost do we make decisions? Financially or at human cost? Anyway, firmly in the studios and putting the final touches to the prep ahead of Newcastle Bournemouth. This match had been a little bit of a strange one in the reverse fixture when Bournemouth won at the Vitality Stadium. The Newcastle fans were not happy, and Kieran Trippier, the Newcastle captain, had a chat with them after the final whistle, apparently along the lines of, "We are trying our best, but sometimes you can lose." So there was a little bit of a backstory ahead of this game. The game burst into life straight from the off, with Bournemouth playing with freedom and creating chances against an injury hit but still quieter than normal Newcastle. It is goalless at the break before Martin Dubravka slips on receiving a back pass and Dominic Solanke nips in to score for Bournemouth. Now for the sometimes things do not always change for the better. A free kick for Newcastle, and Bournemouth hold a defensive line a couple of yards outside their penalty box. On Trippier's approach to take the free kick, the Newcastle players head towards the penalty box, and in one case too early, and that was one Fabian Schär. He is being marked by Bournemouth's right back Adam Smith, who tugs his shirt a lot outside the penalty area, almost saying, "You are going to be offside if I let you go." But at this point Fabian Schär was offside, and the shirt pulling had started well outside the penalty box. Schär falls into the penalty area and the free kick unfolds and is cleared by Bournemouth. Moments later, VAR calls the referee to the monitor. Now this is my logic if we are going to trace things back. The first incident is critical. Schär is offside before the shirt pulling happens. He is also outside of the penalty area before falling into the area. After what seems an age, a penalty is awarded and scored by Anthony Gordon for 1-1. I am, as a commentator, a little baffled. To me, there doesn't appear to be logic used. As I recall the incident, the first breaking of the laws of association football is offside, so how do we get to a penalty? I struggle badly with VAR for many reasons, not just the emotive dampener, but also where you can stop when retracing incidents on the pitch. VAR is used in the checking of goals and builds up to the goals, but surely more goals would be scored if we scoured corner kicks, players blocking, not looking at the ball, and obstructing players. It does seem that if we are to say the penalty area has a different application of the laws, then just come out and say it. For instance, a high ball towards the halfway line, a centre forward backing into the centre half, and the centre half coming forward into the back of the centre forward, results on the halfway line to primarily a free kick in favour of the centre forward. But a high ball into the penalty area, same motions by the players, is always going to be a defensive free kick. Or let's say a player on the halfway line evades a foul and plays on but loses the ball moments later. No advantage, so a free kick is given. Same scenario inside the box as the player tries to stay on his feet to shoot and misses because he's off balance from the foul challenge, doesn't go back to the infringement, and a penalty doesn't get awarded. So for me, the penalty area changes the implication of Football Association laws. Some years ago, Edinson Cavani won the ball for Manchester United about 30 yards from goal. United went on as no foul on the pitch was given and scored within, let's say, 5 to 10 seconds. VAR intervened when no foul had been given and went back to the challenge and no goal was given. God, I cannot wait to see the later editions of Match of the Day. It will be interesting. For me, Schär was offside even with the shirt pull and before the ball was kicked. So does that mean the ball was still dead, therefore the shirt pull was happening before the game was live? So it cannot be a foul? Because as the ball is hit, he is offside. I don't know, but football is instantaneous and technology can still be perplexing with the interpretations of the laws of the game. Maybe tweaking the laws to a better decision making from the on-field officials would work. For me, goal line technology works okay, as it's a singular, straightforward decision. Offside seem to have your head bone connected to your knee bone and your knee bone connected to your leg bone and your leg bone connected to your foot bone. Oh, hear the word of the Lord. Exactly what piece of human anatomy constitutes offside? And handballs and proximity of the ball hitting an unsuspecting player. Do you want me to go on? Managers and I have always said things even out over a season. Even Geoff Hurst's 66 goal was evened out by Lampard's goal in South Africa years later, and by the way, by the same opposition. Some things do not always change for the better. On the train home, I wondered again, this time about guns, and then how the human race defends itself. Bows and arrows going back in time, before that swords, and before that tools were made from flints like axes from prehistoric times. Before I paused and thought, Who made the first metal, and where did that person get the idea from of grinding iron ore and then heating it up to make metal? I mean, who? Who looked at this substance and thought, I'll make this a powder, then make metal? I mean, as often as I walk across the fields with my dogs, I used to look down at the weeds and thought, who was the first person to say, do you know, I think I could eat that? They might have struck lucky and ate a raw cabbage or lettuce, but they may well have died of poisoning. I mean, who and how? It's like me looking at a broken piece of tarmac and thinking, I could eat that, or maybe I'll try to grind it into a powder and mix it with water and drink it. This might sound silly, but nobody knew, they just tried. I wonder how many people died before they decided that one was lettuce. So, completely and utterly stumped, I arrived home and, believe it or not, fell asleep before match of the day and never even watched it on catch-up. I mentioned to my wife that not everything changes for the better, and she looked me up and down and agreed. Game 61, Porto versus Arsenal on the 21st of February 2024. The Late Late Show is the title. Families, who'd have them? Upheaval and strife loaded on my shoulders. Never tried to help out as I've been thrust under the bus. Let's just say that. Off to the Gary Briggs studio, just down the road for the UEFA Champions League first leg match between Mikel Arteta's Arsenal as they travel to Porto. Like most people in life, issues can often lead to stress levels going over the top of the barometer. I'm not in a good mood after being in a positive mindset earlier, but at least a commentary for me will allow me to forget all that stuff. This is a little soupçon of what I mean. A while back I was driving my car in Oxfordshire and I got a call from one of my friends asking for a little help, and he needed it quickly. So I drove to meet him and got there as quick as I could, pulled up half on the road and half on the pavement, jumped out and assisted him. Just as I finished helping him out, we spoke briefly about maybe working together, and I was gently dissuading him against working with me, as I always seem to piss people off. Then right on cue, a person on a mobility scooter came along and blew a fuse at my parking. See, you help out one, piss off another. I don't like letting people down, and I don't believe fully in myself. So when people do believe, I cannot shake that. I'm better off doing it on my own, as it'll all be my own fault sort of mentality. Some people have called me a maverick, but it's not that. I just know myself inside and out. At some point I will fuck up. So why drag others into my fuck up? Tomo is decent and in a way possibly knows this. If things are rolling well, I'm getting desperate, things will go wrong. This in part is due to being stripped of any self-respect as a young kid by my teacher, who encouraged everyone around me to laugh at me. No wonder it takes me time to do things, as I try to take out all the possible problems before undertaking anything, which in turn then means if it all goes wrong, it's doubly depressing. Adding to that wanting to try a lot of the time, and the frustration then bleeds into anger. Vicious circle, anyone? Well, Arsenal versus Porto. Arsenal are getting a step closer to getting back to the summit in football. They pushed City all the way to the title last year, and this year have moved on again. Porto away should be manageable for the Gunners, but the game doesn't really pan out that way. Arsenal aren't as good as they can be. In fact, for me it was a lacklustre performance, and I cannot really recall any real chances for them. So as we head into the part of the game when if anybody scores it'll be hard for the other side to come back from, Galeno for Porto scored a cracker in stoppage time to win the game 1-0. I take time to reflect on the game as I pack up and remember how I often believe you cannot afford to lose a game in a tournament and be champions. I still believe in the old style of knockout football. You couldn't lose and win. Fuddy-duddy to the fore, I could not imagine playing football and running around with a cup and some side stood on the touchline saying, we're better than you because we beat you in a group game. Strange how I think about things and their respective barometers in my head. I drove home and spent some time chatting things over with my wife, and soon time has rocked on till midnight. I get into bed and lay awake with my mind going over the things throughout the day. I'm finding it hard to shut off and think about going back downstairs to maybe find some monotone program to send me off to sleep. I don't though, I stay in bed, turning over to try and balance a busy schedule. Snoring resonates and I look at my beagle boy Rocco, off in the land of Nod so very, very quickly. I shut my eyes and hope to go into a world with no consequences. And finally I do. I dream a lot. I dream of fairly strange things. Must be the Prozac. But I can tell you certain things do reoccur in my dreams, and I know they're not real, like a weird hotel and not being able to swipe the screen on my iPhone to get help or make a call. That's just two of the things, but frustratingly, they are always frustrating dream situations. Teeth grinding in the night and blood pressure headaches in the morning. Maybe I should see a doctor. I do have an appointment booked sometime in 2026. Haha! My mind finally switches off. I don't remember what time, but I did see 2 a.m. thanks to my late show. Game 62, Crystal Palace versus Burnley on the 24th of February 2024. Titled, Trainer Tightening or Good or Bad? On the trip in today, two things plagued my troubled mind. My right trainer and my Journeyman Commentator podcast. Okay, let's try and sort this out, starting with the trainer tightening issue. Now apparently, we as human beings have one foot slightly larger than the other. Why I say this is not pivotal to this thought process, but just to enlighten you. But this morning I elect to wear trainers for comfort because it's not going to be wet. I tend to tie my trainer to a foot gripping but not overly tight fit. That allows for a slip-on entry and exit of the said trainers. But some months ago I purchased some retro Roy of the Rovers Gola trainers in yellow and blue. Nay, blue predominantly with yellow strappage. These arrived already laced and tied, but in fairness not in a common way of tying laces, a little more elaborate. But with a little easing and adjusting, these became slip-on and offable. Now I'm not sure how, but over the ensuing months the left one has sort of tightened and the right one has got loose. Now, the snug fit of the left one is bordering on excessive, but it is bearable. The right one is into the annoyingly loose area. But here's the rub. And that lazy, I haven't over the months readdressed this. So today, the grip and slackness of the left and right trainers does need to be addressed. On the platform of Oxford Parkway, I spoke to myself and said, take them off on the train, redo the lace in a more traditional way, and then reinsert your feet and adjust, just like you have for your whole life. I mentally agree with myself that this is a good idea, and full of intention, I decide I will carry out this covert trainer adjustment on the train. But unbeknown to me, my mind brought up a second area of the title, good or bad. Believe it or not, I'm not really a fan of myself with my hypercritical nature. So, without thinking, I have in my hands my earpods, which I duly insert and decide to have a listen back to a couple of episodes of my podcast, The Journeyman Commentator, to see what I think. Lots of people don't like hearing the sound of their own voice, and I am one. You tell me why I did this act of self-sabotage. It was never going to end well with my self-depreciating and critical analysis, was it? I listened to 6 episodes in all and winced, smiles and grimaced my way through it. I wrote it so I knew what was coming, but I couldn't really be sure whether it's good or bad in a slightly bizarre way, or even just cult listening. A bit like the Prisoner series back in the 60s. That series was brilliantly strange with many ways of reading the storylines, etc. Maybe, as he was a number 2, had another meaning altogether, or maybe my podcast was just a number 2 anyway. I remember some years ago talking to Sue about a promo we'd done for the Big Banana Football Show. We thought it was funny, and she as the programme controller didn't. It became one of those meaningless sort of discussions where we didn't see each other's point of view. She said something that made me change my perspective. It made me realise that once again, in life, one man's meat is another man's poison. You have to be objective and not insular, open to points of view. In this case, I thought it was funny and she didn't. But from there on in, I thought I was more measured in terms of humour and how it was perceived by all and not just me. So in a way, the worst comedians are the ones who laugh at their own jokes, which explains my reluctance to sing from the rooftops about my Journeyman podcast, which I wouldn't do anyway because of mainly my lack of education and self-worth. Well, a reasonable time had passed with me listening to myself and the trainers didn't get done. Another moment had passed and the lazy boy hasn't dealt with his mentally troubling issue. I just can't be asked. That at times is a story of my own life, or maybe subliminally my mind is helping me out by leaving an issue to call upon before deep thinking ensues some other time. It is into the studio I head and it's commentator envy time. I speak to one of the commentators in the studio who gives me a sort of smiley grimace on my revealing of my match. That said it all. Palace versus Burnley. Believe it or not, it has to be a must-win match for the Eagles, as it is Oliver Glasner's first game since Roy Hodgson stepped aside, and they are not that far off points-wise, the dreaded dotted line. And for Burnley, they have to start winning, and forgive me, Palace away isn't a top 6 side away, is it? The commentator squad is depleted this week through illness, so the squad is stretched but we are all ready for another Saturday afternoon. Well, Palace were unchanged and Burnley had 2 changes, but the game really hinged on a straight red card for Josh Brownhill when he dragged back Lerma after being caught flat-footed from a Trafford pass out. From then on, injuries or not, Palace kept coming forward before Burnley were broken midway through the second half with 2 goals in 4 minutes and then a penalty. Oliver's army was on its way. Oh, by the way, we had a minimum of 12 minutes of time to be added on, which went to nearly 14. By the time I had delivered my considered, my train was now going to be another half an hour later than last season. I took my favourite Oxford line home from Marylebone and had a bet and won 45 quid before settling down to try and learn something after checking the local schools. But I'm sidetracked with my local side's demise at home, and on Twitter X it was full of moans and groans. I did manage to see them in the week, and in fairness the club doesn't seem to be in perfect harmony. I got off the train and was picked up by my wife and Beagle. They put me down and we drove home where I had cauliflower cheese. And when I arrived home I slipped off the loose and tight trainers, and yes, I didn't adjust them all day long. I will do it, I promise. Footnote, no pun intended, the loose trainers were addressed on the 22nd of April 2024.